All right, we're here with Kenneth Farrow, former XFL player, and had a bunch of stuff to go. We wanted to bring him on to talk about all this union stuff. So before we get started, Kenneth, I guess kind of give everybody a background of your history in the spring football world.
Yeah. So appreciate you having me on. Y'all have done an amazing job kind of covering the spring level for a lot of years now. So definitely much appreciated. Yeah, my first year in the spring league level was 2019 back in the AAF. From there got a trial with the Dolphins and then winded up back on the XFL roster in 2020. And then took a couple of years off to try to get the union thing off the ground and then wind up getting drafted by the Renegades in 2023, and that winded up being my last year. Got a championship, but unfortunately, I tore my ACL about
Mm.
halfway through. But it was fun to kind of get back out there, and I was back at home in Dallas Fort Worth area, so it was cool to be back out there one last time, and now we're back in the union space, trying to kind of get everything back up off the ground and running for these guys going into this season with the UFL, with the merger and all that good stuff. So,
So how did you kind of formulate all like the union stuff? Because you guys, there was this whole, I mean, the AAF players, the season was basically canceled. They were cut out, they were stuck in hotels. I mean, is that where kind of all this started?
yeah, I think the what really got us was obviously the AAF was a crazy situation for a lot of guys. And then the following year, COVID shutting down XFL in 2020. But we really just kind of took it upon ourselves because there was some open bankruptcy cases, right? And so AAF was bankrupt, XFL was bankrupt, and we were kind of in the dark about where to file claims, how much we were getting, and all that type of stuff. And so that's when we started a nonprofit organization at the time, just to be able to kind of get a collective entity to be like, hey, this is where we're gonna, kind of call home base for the guys that are playing in the spring league. And so we were able to help. I would say about 80% of the guys in the AAF kind of recover that bankruptcy claim. We got the deadline extended, and we're currently working on getting the XFL from 2020 bankruptcy payouts, uh, getting guys the correct information that distribution should be going out in October or November. So that's kind of really what started us was the bankruptcies. And then obviously being in some of the situations that we were in, we felt like, hey, if we don't get a union, there's been a couple of, circumstances, whether it was, the XFL, they had put out a salary that kind of started floating around the public, and we got there and it was significantly lower than kind of what a lot of guys thought we were going into that situation. And yeah, that was kind of what did it. And then yeah, just trying to make sure that guys are protected at this level is something that, we kind of set out from the beginning to do. And, luckily we're here with the opportunity to be able to represent guys for the first time. The UFPA will be able to this year. So it's been a long journey, a lot of learning. We went through bankruptcy one-on-one about three or four times,
Mm.
you know, just making sure that guys are getting everything that's out there for them.
And then so the XFL went down, but then the USFL came up, but then the USFL players went with the steel workers. So and I know that you guys were kind of involved and then they were involved. Do you want to talk anything about that?
Yeah, so that's kind of been, the big I guess confusion point amongst a lot of not only players but kind of, anybody who's kind of been paying attention to the space. So originally when we set out, to get the union up off the ground, we had reached out to quite a few different unions. We had got to talk with NFLPA a little bit. We got to talk with, Teamsters, a couple other unions, and the steelworkers were, kind of the only ones that were like, "Hey, we'll help y'all right now." We didn't really get anything written on paper to say like, "Hey, the UFPA will be the union to be able to handle, the things that come along with, negotiations and grievances and stuff like that." That was just kind of the shared. We shared it verbally as a vision of the UFPA being able to be the union, and kind of not knowing what we didn't know at the time. Obviously, in the thick of still trying to play and get to the NFL and do those things. We were just like, hey, we got help, what I mean? Let's move. And the steelworkers did help us a lot. So basically, we at that point in time, after the 2020 is shut down, I had actually tore my plantar fascia right after the season ended in 2020, and I couldn't get surgery because we were cut off from insurance. So, some of these situations that guys are going through, what I mean, we've dealt with firsthand. And at that moment in time, the steelworkers hired us on as organizers with the long-term goal of the UFPA kind of being the union, right? And once everything got organized and the USFL players, we got enough card signs for the guys to vote. Everybody voted yes for the steelworkers. At that point in time, we were kind of notified by the steelworkers of, hey, y'all can no longer be a part of this because y'all aren't active players. And that was kind of never really talked about prior to
Yeah.
that. So we kind of got blindsided. The players definitely got blindsided because I mean, at the time, the steelworkers were letting us be on Instagram, UFPA this, UFPA that. And then once the election went up, they're like, yep, no more UFPA, strictly steelworkers.
Mm,
So, no bad blood or anything. I just think that they went about it a little bit deceitful, at that time. And unfortunately, I think the reason why, they kind of saw the passion of what we were able to do as far from an organizing standpoint, they knew we would never be okay with the percentage of the dues that they would be taking from the guys
mm,
unionizing under them, especially when you're talking about 400 guys that are only making 50,000. It was upwards of, 50% of how much dues were getting not, you know, directed towards their association of players.
mm,
And so that was the number one thing that kind of rubbed us the wrong way. It was like, okay, when the dues started coming in, we were no longer able to, have a role in anything that went on. And so from that standpoint, we were persuaded by not only us, we wanted to finish out kind of the vision that we had put together long term, but a lot of players were extremely unhappy with that. Um, and so from that point on, we went along the route of trying to figure out how we could set up as an independent union. Hindsight, it was very easy, just not having the legal knowledge of how to set up an entity in that way. Definitely could have been avoided, but we learned a lot throughout the process. So now we do have our LM1 status. We are a labor union filed under NLRB, and as we speak right now, the steelworkers had actually pulled out of the election. We had gotten up. We had talked to all the guys this season. A lot of the guys were, pretty adamant about, kind of getting us at the seat and to be able to do the bargaining and just kind of run the union and run the players association how we would want it to be ran as players, with communication and transparency. And in my mind, these a lot of these guys are my former teammates, if not about 20%, that at some point in time have been my teammates. So
mm,
uh, yeah, there's been a little bit of confusion, but to be able to, look all, my peers and teammates and, colleagues in the eye and let them know, hey, every single penny is going here, here, here. That's kind of the transparency level we want to be able to run this players association at. And we feel like we're plenty equipped with the knowledge and the team to be able to go in and do some good things for the players. So we were able to get the independent union up off the ground. We were able to get the card signed, and now there's election going out. Guys are actually currently receiving mail-in ballots to be able to vote for us. And with the steelworkers withdrawing from the election, there's really nobody else. So we are excited about kind of the future. We feel like we can really start to build a strong line of communication and be able to just have the transparency that we feel like these guys are due at the end of the day. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a short version of it, but it's been a lot of, trials and tribulations to get to this point.
So what happened? So we had the USFL, and then those players went with the Steelworkers. Then the XFL returns under the Rock. There was no union there, but during the season there was rumblings about the NFLPA, and then the XFL players said no to the uh, Steelworkers Union, and then
Right.
we moved into the UFL merger, and then I mean, can you kind of walk us through the XFL part and then the merger part?
Yeah, so when the once they kind of gave us the boot after 2022 saying, "Hey, y'all aren't active players," we were a little bit taken back, but at the time, I mean, we kind of just evaluated the situation and said, well, we don't have a union entity. We can't get to the table ourselves, regardless of what just happened and how, we were just, let go of kind of very abruptly and kind of blindsided. We knew that, like, at the very least, there's a union in place for these guys. So we were like, okay, well, just kind of, take it on the chin and keep moving forward and kind of see what starts to develop. And so once we got drafted by the XFL, we had another meeting with, the kind of higher ups from the steel workers, and we were like, hey, once we're into the XFL and these guys are, talking about organizing again, there has to be some major changes that go on as far as kind of the structure, the autonomy of how this union is going to be ran if we're going to organize again, try to organize underneath the steel workers. And at that moment in time, there started to get a little bit of, disgruntled guys working with the steelworkers union. The USFLPA is what they called it, but it's really
Right.
just a local of the steelworkers. There was no separation there. It was all steelworkers, right? And so um, there was a little bit of confusion on that end, because one, we were completely kind of pushed out, right? Um, Ryan Cave, one of our other members, was able to stay on and help with negotiations, and that's when you saw the $1,600 living stipend kick in, and I think it was like an $800 raise from 4,500 to like 53, from
Mm,
22 to 23, and so we kind of go into the XFL season in 2023 under another verbal like, hey, once the XFL is up off the ground, we'll reconvene, we'll make changes to bylaws or whatever we have to do to make sure that, we're in more of alignment of, being able to run a little bit more autonomously with the Players Association. And by that time it was too late. There was a lot of upset guys with the USFL Players Association, and then rumblings started coming from, I think, more so guys that just didn't know at that time,
mm.
thinking, okay, well, we don't like the steelworkers, we can go with the NFLPA, not knowing that we had already talked to the NFLPA. They have no interest at all whatsoever at that
Oh.
at representing us. You know what I mean? So it was like, yeah. So once that rumor started to spread, I mean, once guys hear NFLPA, what I mean, it's over with. They're like, yeah,
Mm,
we should do that. Like, yeah, we
mm.
talked to Demoris, we talked to all those guys, no interest there. So,
Gotcha.
um, so once that kind of went down and the steel workers got voted down, that's when we were like, okay, here's kind of our chance to set up independently. And then sure enough, the merger happens. And so with the merger, we really felt like, because it was a merger and because the UFL was basically a new entity that got created, everybody got their contracts terminated at the end of the year in 2023. I believe that's the correct date. Yeah, 2023. Everybody was terminated, and then in January the steelworkers come out and recognize themselves as a union, and there's no employees of this new UFL league and nobody's under contract. So we
Oh.
were like, that doesn't really make too much sense. So we started kind of doing our research, and it wind up falling under the category of unfair labor practices, which is what we had to go and file because we felt like there was an illegal recognition. We felt like nobody voted on the CBA. They adopted CBA from a previous league that had shut down to implement into a new entity league, the UFL. No votes on the CBA, no votes on, whether or not the steelworkers were going to be the union. So we just felt like there was a lot of things that weren't done properly from a labor standpoint. And we were able to kind of put those things in motion to kind of, I guess, put a little bit of, pressure on them. And ultimately, when we were able to trigger an election with, a lot of the players signing, our authorization cards by the end of the year of this past season, that's when they kind of decided to back out. I'm not sure, whether, I'm not really sure too much of the reason, but I know we did have pending charges and, obviously a small kind of grassroots union, with very strong ties to all the players. I don't know how the election would have turned out, in their
Mm.
favor. So that's kind of how we got here today. And so now, with the merger and the UFL and all of those things that have transpired over the last couple of years, these guys will have their first opportunity to vote for us as a players union moving forward.
And then so at the end of the year, there was cards to join any union, or was it just basically yours and then that was it?
Yeah, so
Or
at the
the
end,
or the steel workers?
no, so the steel workers were identified by the league as the union already. And
Hmm.
so there's a 30-day window in labor in the labor world. There's a 30-day window before the CBA expires where if the if the union members and the players feel like they want to go with a different union, that's the time window they can submit and file a petition to get an election up. And
Uh-huh.
so there was no other cards except for us because we were the only union, working to try to basically be able to represent the players. And so once the election was filed, that's when the steelworkers withdrew. And so now there was supposed to be a ballot with the steelworkers and us,
Hmm.
but they withdrew. So now it's us or no union. And so, like I said, our hopes is to be able to connect with these guys and be able to get everybody on the same page. We feel like our experience and everything that we've been through and just the our members on our team give us more than the knowledge that we need to be able to go in there and get things done for guys. I think one of the biggest things is there was a couple of things that hit the headlines about guys running out of insurance because this year was the first year that they didn't have the year-round health insurance. They got cut
Hmm.
off, so it's just going to be, simple things like that. But, I told the guys, on several calls that we've had already is like, hey, we created this entity, so the players could really take a control of kind of what goes on. We're not some, superpower with 900,000 members, right?
Hmm.
This is just grassroots. We played. We feel like we know best. Ryan Cave has done 3 CBAs in the Arena League. And once you play the game for this long, I mean, there's a very few people that we can't pick up the phone and call, whether it's former players, um, you know, former general counsel to, leagues or anything like that. So we have a very strong network and we feel like we can get what needs to be done, achieved for the guys for sure.
And so now that this vote is coming soon, or when is this vote happening for with the players?
Yeah, so I believe I believe September 19th is when they kind of count the tally and count the votes. So we've just been talking with players, texting, email, Zoom calls, just kind of it's been a hassle just going through everything that I just explained for guys.
Hmm.
Imagine being a player and you see UFPA with steel workers and everything starts to, fall apart. And then they were sending out their little propaganda, information on us and where we started. And I'm telling guys, I was like, hey, we interviewed the steel workers. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
at the end of the day, so it's just been a lot of just informing guys, educating guys on what's going on now. So yeah, September 19th, they'll count up the votes and as long as everything goes, how we see, we'll be able to step in and be the representative for these guys moving forward, and hopefully with a strong line of communication with every player that is on the team this year.
Hmm. And then, so how is your relationship with the management of the UFL now with Redbird and Fox?
We had good relationships back in 2022 with Fox. Some of the people that we got to talk to, I thought they were very, open to the union itself.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times, we kind of get caught up in, the presidents of the league and stuff like that. But when it comes to negotiations and the people running, the operation, like you said, Redbird Capital and Fox, those aren't necessarily, football people, if you will. So I think they really, they took well to us, being able to establish the union. And then obviously we have, relationships with guys like Daryl Johnson. He was a former GM of mine in San Antonio in 2019, and even guys like Rick Schaefer. He was general counsel to AF. Guys like Polian. You know what I mean? So we have a pretty strong network of guys who really know the spring football space, um, from that side of things. So we're pretty confident that because we're not trying to come in and say, hey, everybody gets paid 100,000, 150. We understand, the economics of kind of what's going on at this level, but there are some things that we feel like have to be in place just for the safety and just the, well-being of the players from a year-to-year standpoint. These guys go through, 14 weeks of football, then try to make an NFL team. If they do make an NFL team, you're looking at, 30, 25 plus games that these guys are playing. So making sure that we have the proper things in place to make sure that they're protected from a health standpoint, and a resource standpoint. I feel like, there's probably nobody else that can do it better than, the players that have played these leagues in the last 4 or 5 years.
So would you be negotiating with like Daryl Moose Johnson or Russ Brandon or like some
Um,
other people? Like, how does that all work? I guess
yeah,
fans are curious.
Yeah, as of right now, we believe it will be Fox. It looks like Fox is going to be the ones that do the negotiation. Not too sure if Redbird Capital will be there. We'll find out here pretty soon in the next couple of weeks, kind of what that looks like. But I know it was Fox in the last 2 years with the USFL. So,
Gotcha. And then, I mean, we're talking about big name players, AJ McCarron. He's somebody that, has talked about the players and the future of the league and how important it is. I mean, has he kind of been involved in any of this stuff?
oh yeah, and AJ's been pretty vocal about everything. But like we said, we've really tried to keep all this stuff from, being a whole mess. I think, with what I just explained, you can kind of see how that could blow up and go crazy on Twitter. We've
Mm,
had a couple of guys kind of pop off, not knowing all the information and just kind of say some things that were just, a lot of, you know what I mean?
uh
It just wasn't true. And so, yeah, AJ McCarron is definitely a guy that's been an advocate for us. The whole St. Louis Battlehawks team, and you got to think the XFL voted the Steelworkers down already. And
mm.
so, a lot of those teams were already in the know of kind of what was going on. So, but even some of the USFL, former USFL teams, we talked to the Birmingham team, a lot of those guys before they got out, and they hadn't really heard too much from anybody all season, and guys were paying dues. So I think we're in a really good space where there's a good there's a good solid number of guys who really understand kind of what we're trying to do, and that are, like you said, kind of key names within the league. Um, and they're going to be able to contribute. And like I said, we don't want this to be a, hey, you have the union, you have the players. We want this thing to be just one cohesive unit moving forward. The union is just something we set up to kind of protect ourselves. So I think as we start to get closer, to, the season approaching, and we start to have our meetings and kind of get everybody on the same page, you'll kind of start to see more and more support from some of the bigger names in the league.
And then, but some of with this vote going on, I mean, there's still like not everybody's under contract, like with
Right.
the UFL. Like, how does that work?
Right. So that's been kind of a complicated part of it and something we had to figure out. So it's basically everybody from the bargaining unit, um at the end of the season last year. So you got about 60 guys that are all over the place in the NFL. I think 70
You're right.
now. And so, all those guys will have a chance to vote and be able to contribute to the mail-in ballot, and the election, which we encourage everybody to do. Like I said, we want this thing to be, really, um, really filled out by the players. This isn't something that we just made and say, hey, we're going to take off and, do this all ourselves. We want
Mm.
this to be a cohesive unit. So, and I think the players that are not playing, or maybe somewhere else, or maybe they're done playing, they kind of understand the significance of, what we're trying to do. So I think those guys will show up and kind of put in their ballots, as well. So yeah, I think overall we're in a really good place just because we have been able to talk to so many guys face to face and really break down, the ins and outs of everything that has transpired in the last couple of years.
Okay. And then, so is there any final things you want to tell players or fans out there before we wrap this up? It was very,
Yeah.
very informative, very interesting. And a lot of the fans are very interested, not only what happens on the field, but they have a vested personal interest in the league, so they want to know how things are going on behind the scenes. So I appreciate you letting us in on some behind the
Yeah.
scenes detail. But
Yeah.
yeah, is there anything you want to put out there?
Yeah, I think, for the guys that come across this, you know, we are, I mean, we've got contact information from everybody. So just, guys, if you're seeing this and haven't been in tune to the email or anything like that, definitely get in contact with our socials. The United FB players on Twitter and Instagram is kind of, you send a DM to either one of those, we'll be able to, kind of see that you sent that and get in contact with you right away. And then UFPA, union.org is a website that you can kind of stay up to date with. We got a calendar on there for guys. So if you or haven't got the email or haven't got a text, we'll kind of have our calendar Zoom meetings just kind of scheduled out on there so guys can kind of see where to tune in. And so yeah, I mean this we're not, we're not going into this thing trying to be any type of, you know, source of entertainment or creative content, and you know what I mean. This is strictly for us as players to be able to have a voice and be able to get to the table and kind of talk about the things that we all know we need. So to the fans, I think we've definitely seen, how much support that y'all have, given these spring leagues, and y'all are definitely kind of what makes it go. So just super kudos to y'all, kind of showing up year after year. I know this thing has been, kind of a roller coaster to try to get something off the ground. So we're excited to see the UFL go into the second year. And like I said, we by no means are trying to bleed the pockets or anything. We just want to make sure that we got our basics covered and keep moving forward from here and keep continuing to help grow the league more than anything else.
All right. Well, Kenneth Farrow, appreciate your time coming on the show.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, Mark.